Hey guys, Ian here, and in this video, we're going to be taking a look at integrating the AWS Rekognition Service into a Laravel project. So what is AWS Rekognition? Put simply, it's a tool that you can add image and video analysis to your application. Put practically, it does things like object recognition, facial recognition, scene detection, and also explicit content detection. And that's really just a corner of what AWS Rekognition can offer. But personally, I've used AWS Rekognition in many applications to detect inappropriate content in user-submitted photos and videos. So before we jump in today, there are costs associated with AWS Rekognition. AWS charges about $1 per 1,000 images or videos analyzed. And that breaks down to about 0.001 cent per image. And there's also a free tier option for this service as well. AWS will give you 5,000 free images for the first 12 months that you have your account. So what are we going to be doing today? Well, we're going to be building a simple application that sort of mimics the Facebook timeline, where users can go in, they can submit a post that can contain a photo or a video, and then the post is visible for all the other users to see. We're going to keep it very simple today and focus on our main objective of adding the image analysis to our Laravel application. For this tutorial, I'll be using my MacBook and I'll be using PHP Storm as my IDE and then SQL Pro for my database GUI. This tutorial is going to have a heavy focus on writing PHP code using the Laravel framework. So let's go ahead and get started.
So the first thing I'm going to do is change into my desktop, and then I'm going to use the Laravel global installer to set up a new Laravel project. So the command's going to run, it's going to build my project, and it is going to take me a minute, so I'm going to go ahead and speed up the video for the process. Alright, so the rest of the tutorial is going to happen in PHP Storm, so I can go ahead and close my terminal and get this project open in PHP Storm. Once we're inside the project, I'm going to go ahead and add our AWS SDK for PHP using Composer. Once that's installed, I'll go ahead and get my database connected. I'll pop in my database password, and then for my specific local setup, I do have to specify a DB socket. If you do not know what this means, chances are you do not need to include this line. Now that our env file is set up, I'll go ahead and hop into SQL Pro and create a new database called Timeline. I'll go ahead and run the php artisan migrate command to populate our tables into our database. Awesome, so my database tables are showing up, everything is good here. So I'll run the command php artisan make model post -mcr, and you can see in our terminal it created 3 files. We're going to start with the migration and get our data structure in place first. The first column I'm going to create is an unsigned big integer column, and this is going to be for our user ID, or the author of the post. The next column is going to be called title, and it's just going to be a string. Then we'll create a description column with a type of long text, and we're going to make this one nullable because it's going to be optional. And then finally, we'll create an image path field, and this is going to point to the location of any image that's uploaded with our post. And images are going to be optional as well, so I'm going to make this nullable. And then I can't forget to hook up our foreign key reference on the user ID column to the users table. Once I have all that done, I can run php artisan migrate again and just verify that this post table was in fact populated into my database. So we're ready to jump into the models. I'm going to go ahead and open our user model and add a post relationship at the bottom. And this is just saying that one user model has many posts. And this is going to make it a little bit easier for us to create posts later on. And then I'm just going to apply the inverse relationship to the post model. So one post model belongs to a user. Then I'm going to add a fillable property that specifies the fields that are allowed to be filled through mass assignment. So we have the model done. We can go ahead and jump into our controller. And since our controller already has our resource methods set up, we can go ahead and set up our route next. So I'll jump into the routes web.php file. I'm going to create a route group so I can apply the auth middleware on it. And then since we used a resource controller, I can just use a single line to define all the routes in this controller. And that's going to be route resource with the name of the URI and then the controller. And then while I'm in here, I'm also going to change the default homepage that loads after you log in. Instead of loading the dashboard template page that came with Laravel, I'm just going to point it to the posts.index page that we're about to make. So I'll hop into resources, views. I'm going to find that existing dashboard page and I'm just going to make a copy of it and we're going to call it posts. In the file, all I'm going to do is delete the jetstream component and then I'm going to rename it to posts. Now we can hop in the controller and return the view that we just created. And let's go ahead and spin up a local web server using artisan serve just to make sure this is working. So our homepage loaded, I can go ahead and click register and create a new account for our application. And we're in. I can see posts is at the top, and if I look at the URL, I can see that it's /posts. So after login, it did redirect correctly. So back on the index route, I'm gonna go ahead and add all the posts to this page so that later on, if I wanted to display a listing of all the posts, I could do that. So the next thing we'll do is create a form to submit new posts. And I'm gonna make the action a post.store method, and that was created for us automatically using the resource controller. I'm gonna set our method to post. And I can't forget to set the enc type to multi-part form data because we're gonna have a file upload on this form. Now with all Laravel forms, I'm gonna remember to include our CSRF token, and then I'll go ahead and add our fields for this form. I'm gonna add a post title, the file field for our image. This tutorial is not about CSS or styling, so I'm not going to apply any classes or specific styles to this form, so it's not going to look the best. However, it will get the job done. And then an optional description. And last but not least, I'll add a submit button. The last thing I'm going to add into this blade file is the Laravel validation errors. And if you just pull up the validation documentation page from Laravel directly, you can see that they provide you a little code snippet that I'm pasting into my code here to display any errors. So let's jump into the controller. I'm going to find this store method, and this is the method that's receiving that form submission. And the first thing we're going to do is add some validation roles to this form. I want to make sure that a title is always supplied, so I'm going to set this to required. We'll add an image in here, and it's going to be optional, so we'll add nullable sometimes, and when it is provided, it should be a file. And then description is also going to be optional as well. The next thing I'll do is use this relationship we created on the users model to create a new post in the database. And for now, all I'm going to put on it is the title and the description. And I almost forgot to store this into a variable so that we can reference it later. So I'll go ahead and do that. And then we'll just return back to the form. So let's go ahead and just verify that it works. It's not taking an image yet. I didn't supply a title, and so you can see the validation error did come through. So I'll go ahead and I'll supply a title. I'll click submit. And we can see that the entry was populated into our database. So the next thing we're going to do is handle the image file. We'll go ahead and create an if statement, and we'll say that if this request does have an image file, we're going to store it into our local file system. And we can do this all in one line. I'll pull the file called image out of the request, and then I'm going to store it at the path of public/posts. Next, we're going to check to make sure that the file was indeed uploaded, and I'm going to do that by saying if image path equals null, then we're just going to redirect back to the form with an error. If the file was indeed uploaded successfully, next we can go ahead and store that image path onto the model. So let's go ahead and test that out. We'll hop back to the form, give it a name, and this time we'll actually pick an image. And we'll give it a description. We'll submit that, we'll refresh our database, and wonderful. We now have a new entry in here with the title, description, and a path to the picture. And if I pull up that folder in my local file system, I can see that the picture was indeed uploaded. So really the only thing we need to do now is look at that picture and make sure that it doesn't contain any explicit nudity. And this is where the AWS Rekognition Service is going to come in. So first I'll create a new Rekognition client class. And this class takes one parameter, which contains an array of the configuration. The first configuration key that we need to provide is the default region, and then we need to provide the version of the API we want to use. So let's hop into the AWS console. And the first thing I need to do is actually create an IAM user because I don't want to use my root account to give access to Rekognition. So I'm just going to walk through a couple steps to create a new IAM user and get an access ID and a secret key. For this tutorial, I'm just going to give my user full access to Rekognition and Rekognition only. So I have my access ID and then my secret key, and I'll go ahead and paste those into my env file. So I do want to check the region that we're using. Not all AWS services are available in all regions. So I'm just going to pull up the Rekognition service and make sure that it does work in the US East 1 region. And finally, for the version, I'm just going to hard code latest in here. So now that we have our client hooked up, we can actually do some magic here. So the first thing I'm going to do is actually open the file, and I'm going to use the fopenphp function to do this. For the first parameter on fopen, I'm going to provide the path for the local file that I just uploaded. And then the second parameter is just going to be the letter R. Next, I'm going to create a new variable called bytes, and I'm going to populate it with the PHP function fread. And for the parameter, I'm going to pass in the size of the file. Next, we're ready to actually make a call to the AWS SDK. So I'm going to store this in a variable called results, and I'm going to call our AWS client, and then the function detect moderation labels. For this function, it takes in one parameter, which is an array of the data we want to pass. So I'm going to pass in the image, and the image is also going to be array, and the array is going to have the bytes inside. And then the second key I can provide is the min confidence. And this is going to determine how strict your application is. For example, if you want your application to be very strict with nudity, you would set this to 0. And then finally, I'm going to pull the moderation labels off of the results that we got back, and I'm going to store them in this variable called result labels. And just to see what's happening, let's go ahead and dump this to the screen so we can see the raw data coming back from AWS. Whoops. Okay. So it looks like I forgot the first parameter for this fread function, which is actually going to be the image that we were reading. So I'll add that in, we'll go back, and let's resubmit this form. So the image that I just uploaded was actually pretty family friendly. It did not contain any nudity, so there were no moderation labels to return. Let's go ahead and try it with an explicit image. For this one, I'll just use one that contains drug paraphernalia. And the moderation labels come back, and we can see that AWS is 99% certain that this image contains drug products. And we can see the structure and all the data coming back here. Finally, let's go ahead and try one with explicit nudity. I do have it blurred on the screen. And we can see that AWS is pretty certain that this image contains explicit nudity. It is 95% sure. So now that we saw how the data is coming back from AWS, we can add a conditional statement so that we can determine if the image has explicit nudity. So I'm going to use the array search function, and we're going to search an array for the term explicit nudity. And since this is a multi-dimensional array, I'm going to use array columns and provide the key name. And so here we can say that if the search is not false, if it finds the term explicit nudity in the results returned by AWS, let's redirect them back to the form and let them know that their image contained explicit nudity. Let's go ahead and try this out. So I'll pick my explicit image again, we'll upload this form. Okay, so I provided the wrong variable for array column. That was supposed to be the results label variable, so we'll go ahead and switch that out. Refresh our page, resubmit this form, and you can see that the error did come back and it said this image contains explicit nudity. The last thing we need to do is actually delete the post. Since it is being created initially, we can see that all of these entries are being created even if they're not passing the nudity check. We'll resubmit this form with this new title, and let's just check our database to make sure it didn't get stored. And that's it.
Thanks so much for watching today, guys. If you like what you saw, please hit that thumbs up button on this video and subscribe to my channel for future videos.